pushing us to the limit. And what do I mean by that? You're asking us to talk about history, the history of the South. This is in Georgia. What happened in Georgia? There were savages in Georgia. It was the ancestors of the white right-wingers. They were absolute savages. They murdered people, they lynched people, they raped people, they enslaved people. They took babies from their mothers and sold them as property. You want to talk about savages? Your ancestors were the biggest savages the world has ever seen. So don't you dare call a black man a savage after you murdered him. Don't you dare do that. I'm so sick of African Americans being called violent when the world's worst violence was done to them, not by them, to them, not by them. For God's sake, you want to do racist stereotypes? If it fit anywhere, and it doesn't, but if it fit anywhere, it would certainly fit white right-wingers in the South, who has hundreds of years of history of being savages. Savages!
You don't get to enslave people, lynch people, beat people, rape people, eat people, segregate people, lock people out of resources, destabilize families, over-police communities, undereducate schools, poison neighborhoods, and then turn around and have the fucking audacity to say, why are they so angry? What the fuck do you mean, why are they so angry? That question alone is disrespectful as hell, because anger does not come out of nowhere. Intensity does not come out of nowhere. Pain does not come out of nowhere.
It's easier to fool a man than to convince him he's been fooled. People do not seek truth. They seek comfort. They cling to their beliefs, not because they are right, but because they are afraid to be wrong. The chains of ignorance are light until the day you try to break them.
This is why they ban our history. They ban our history because black history, by definition, is political.
That's right.
Because black people, by definition, are political, right? Our history is political because every story of American greatness, every story of American exceptionalism you want to tell, here we are off to the corner. Say, how do you explain us?
That's right.
If all this is true, why are we here? If all this is true, how do you explain how you suppressed our rights for 350 years? How you bought and sold our ancestors? How you claim to be democratizing Europe, but denying violently democracy for black people here. So we're the most inconvenient people to the story of American exceptionalism.
Right.
So they want to ban our history because we give lie, right? We reveal the lie of this country.
Right.
And we are heroes of that story. So what the research shows is that when you teach black children black history, they do better academically.
Absolutely.
This is not shocking.
That's right. It's right.
Right? If you see yourself in the story, then you have a powerful sense of who you are. Sure. And I know, I mean, this is why they ban our history, because once I got a little taste of black history, I became incorrigible as a student. I was challenging everything, right? I would go up in social studies like, where are we? Why aren't you talking about this?
They gave you whitewashed Bible stories, but the facts prove Moses, Solomon, and even Adam were black. Moses. He was raised as an Egyptian prince. Ancient Egyptians were African. How's a white man blending in there? Huh? And in Exodus 4:6, his hand turned leprous, white as snow, and then back to normal. If he was already white, how would that be a miracle? Solomon, he literally says in Song of Solomon 1:5, I am black and beautiful, not tanned, not sun-kissed, black. Ethiopia even traces its entire royal bloodline to him. And Adam? Genesis 2:7. God made him from the dust of the ground. What color is rich soil? Dark brown to black. Even science agrees. The first humans were African. So why do they keep showing you whitewashed images?
So why does this matter? Because when we break free from false teachings, we reclaim the truth. Black people are not cursed. We are chosen, called, and created in the image of God, just like everyone else. Fact 5. The Bible prophesied the struggles of black people. One of the most powerful things about the Bible is that it doesn't just tell the history of God's people, it also prophesies their future. Many believers have noticed that some of the prophecies about suffering, captivity, and oppression seem to reflect the historical struggles of black people. Could it be that the Bible spoke about the hardships black people would face long before they happened?
Fact about slavery they don't teach you in Sunday school. The Lord said unto Abraham, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country that's not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions." That's Genesis 15:13. Sounds familiar? In the early 15th century, the Portuguese were the first to capture slave off the western coast of Africa, starting with Guinea, Senegal, and modern-day Ghana. Then the Spaniards adopted the practice. Then the Roman Catholic turned it into a business, making the British Empire the biggest beneficiary of the transatlantic and the Middle Passage. Slave trade transporting approximately 12.5 million Africans between 1619 and the early 1800s, scattering families from remote and nearby villages in Africa to the New World. Modern-day North American, South America, and the Caribbean. All of those nations I mentioned are going to face the wrath of the Most High God. Genesis 15:15, the Lord said, "In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure," meaning the land that are being occupied by the Edomites. Modern-day Israel and Africa will be preoccupied by the descendants of the enslaved, but will gradually manifest it. Black people are the ones that have been scattered among all nations. They have been enslaved for 400 years without identity in a strange land. You're telling me that the Most High wasn't telling or foretelling us these things for years? Ever wonder why the slave masters supervised us back in the days of slavery when our ancestors were reading the Bible? Ever wonder why the Roman Empire destroyed the black images of Jesus, converted to the image Julius Caesar? Ever wonder why in history classes, when doing the history of black people, they start with slavery? But they will never tell about the 12th and the 13th centuries where the Moors traversed Europe, teaching European civilization.
For those of you that don't know who the Moors are, every black person should know who the Moors are. The Moors were a group of black people from Africa that ruled in Europe for some 700 years. They were the kings and the queens. So Europe, a certain part of it, Portugal and Spain, was ruled by black people. We were the kings, we were the queens, the dukes and the earls and all the other kind of stuff. They buried that in history so that you don't know that. I'm not making this up. Go check it for yourself. They were called the Moors. They brought culture. They brought history. They brought math. They brought science. They brought a multitude of things to Europe that they will never get credit for in the public school. So, look it up. M-O-O-R-S, Moors.
They will never tell you about the Canaanites or the people of Kemet, which is modern-day Egypt.
Africans are all over the Bible. They don't want you to know this. Let's talk facts. The Cushites weren't some small tribe. They were an empire. Cush, which is modern-day Ethiopia and Sudan, is mentioned over 50 times in the Bible. Their kings ruled Egypt. Their warriors were feared, and their influence stretched from the Nile to the Middle East. Moses' wife, a Cushite woman. The prophet Zephaniah, Cushite ancestry. And in Psalm 68:31, it straight up says, "Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God." But that's not all. Cushite rulers like Taharka weren't just mentioned in history books. They were out here, influencing biblical events. When the Assyrians tried to invade Judah, guess who came to the rescue? Taharka, a black pharaoh, leading the Cushite army. That's right, Africans were defending Jerusalem. But they don't teach that part, do they? Because admitting Africa's role in the Bible means exposing the lies they've been feeding us for centuries. But history doesn't lie. Africa was never in the background. It was always at the center of the story.
They will never tell you that originally the Palestinian were black. Don't believe me, Google it. If you want consult anything I said, consult the Bible or Google.
Europeans come to this continent, literally ethnically cleanse the indigenous population out of existence, kill them on a scale that has hardly been equaled, and refer to them as savages. That's an achievement. Who's the savage? The first time I encountered this was in a little town in Massachusetts called Deerfield. It's a reconstruction of what that little town looked like in colonial America. And in front of each house is a plaque that explains something about this house. And then description. On the 18th of October of 1702, the savages attacked. the first time I saw this, the savages. You come in here, destroy everything these people have, and they are the savages. That's an interesting move.
It is.
You know?
I hadn't thought of that before.
Think about it.
How come, is there a reason they don't teach us that black people built the pyramids and we had mummies buried in gold? If I'm a savage looking for my next meal, looking for an animal to eat, I'm not worried about burying my ancestors in gold. That's something that only a high-class people got time to even do. We was not looking for our next animal to kill. We was not each other and being savages. We were intelligent, high vibrational gods.
Middle Passage, white people. Slavery, white people. Jim Crow, white people. Lynchings, white people. Trail of Tears, white people. Wounded Knee, white people. Asian internment camps, white people. The vast majority of gun violence, white people. You see a trend? January 6th, white people. Ahmaud Arbery, 3 white guys.
Y'all, sit down right quick. There is a small reconstructed colonial village in Massachusetts called Deerfield. If you walk through it today, in front of one of the houses, there is a historical plaque. The text on that plaque, written by the descendants of the colonists who lived in that house, refers to the people who attacked it as, quote, the savages. Family. The people they are calling savages were Mohawk, Wabanaki, Pocumtuck, and French allied warriors. They were defending land their grandparents had been farming for 2,000 years before any Europeans set foot on this continent. That word has been doing the same work in this country for 400 years, pointed at the wrong people, engraved into the historical record. Carved into bronze in front of houses we walk our children past on field trips. This week, family, the actual receipts on who did what to whom on this continent are going viral. On TikTok, on YouTube, in group chats, from Atlanta to Anchorage. And the people whose ancestors carved the word into the wrong plaque are finally having to sit with what the documented record actually says. Pull up a chair. Welcome back, family. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, drop a comment in the section. We do this together. Let me lay out the receipts. They are loud. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study, conducted by the United States Public Health Service in Macon County, Alabama, from 1932 through 1972, 40 years, 600 black men. Doctors deliberately withheld penicillin from infected patients so the government could observe the disease in human bodies. The study ended only because a whistleblower leaked the documents to the Associated Press. The Trail of Tears, Indian Removal Act, signed May 28, 1830. The Cherokee March alone, between 1838 and 1839, killed approximately 4,000 people on the road. The Wounded Knee Massacre, December 29, 1890, South Dakota. The 7th Cavalry of the United States Army, between 200 and 300 Lakota men, women, and children, many of whom had already surrendered. The Tulsa Race Massacre, May 31st through June 1st, 1921. Greenwood District, 35 city blocks, 300 dead, 10,000 homeless. The wealthiest black neighborhood in the country burned in 18 hours by an organized mob. Japanese American internment, Executive Order 90066, signed February 19, 1942. 120,000 Japanese Americans imprisoned in camps on United States soil for the crime of having Japanese ancestry. The Little Rock Nine, September 4th, 1957. 9 black students attempting to integrate Central High School in Arkansas were surrounded by an organized mob. President Eisenhower had to federalize the Arkansas National Guard to escort them to class. The Mississippi Constitution of 1890, designed to disenfranchise black voters through poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses. Between 1901 and 1967, not a single black American held statewide office in Mississippi, 66 years. That is the documented historical record, family. Federal Archives, National Park Service, Smithsonian. We did not invent any of it. We just refused to let the country forget.
Hello, family. Before we get into the video you came here to watch, I need to take 1 minute, look you in your eye, and lay something out clearly. Because the work this channel does matters, and the way we frame the work matters even more. This channel is a commentary, education, and historical analysis channel. Everything we do here falls under those four headers: commentary, education, history, analysis. We do not produce news reporting in the traditional sense. We comment on the news. We do not produce primary investigation. We comment on the investigations that other people have already published. And we sit with you on this microphone and we walk through the stories that mainstream media will not slow down enough to tell honestly. When you see clips from other creators on this channel, we are using those clips under what is called the Fair Use Doctrine of the United States Copyright Act, which is codified at Section 107 of Title 17 of the United States Code. Fair use protects the use of copyrighted material for purposes of commentary, criticism, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. That is exactly what we are doing here. We credit every original creator we possibly can. We encourage you to go subscribe to the channels we draw from, and we use only the portions of their work that serve our commentary. Now hear me on this part, family, because it is important. This channel loves humanity, every part of it. We center Black history and Black identity because that is the lane we serve, and that lane has been historically undertold. But we do not promote hatred against any racial, ethnic, religious, or political group. Not one, not ever. We do not call for harm against any individual. We do not endorse violence. We do not endorse retaliation. We do not endorse the targeting of any community. What we do is tell our story loudly, honestly, with receipts, with dignity, without apology. If you came here looking for that, family, you're in the right place. Subscribe, hit the bell, drop something in the comments. We are building this work one viewer at a time, and you are a part of it. Now, let's get into tonight's video.
Some of the best. They had some white boys came over here that did the first beheadings in Point Coupee, Louisiana, where I'm from. Slave insurrection, that was the way you dealt with it. Tuskegee syphilis incident. We're going to see how black men die if they have syphilis, but we pretend we treat them with penicillin, and we're just going to watch the pathology of how they die. Now, that wasn't back 200 years ago. That was 1930 to 1974. We're talking about giving these wonderful blankets to the Native Americans infected with smallpox as they walked on that trail of tears just to see how they die and to eliminate their population so we can take all of that land. So the violence that is in America has come from a very learned position that was brought here by some Caucasian folks. All right?
So, what is white fear? We can take that question in many directions, but I think that there's only one way to explain this. White people are afraid of other races being in power in this country. They don't like anyone that isn't white involved in anything that can systematically change this country, especially when it's systemic change that is in the better interest for everyone, not just white people. White privilege is real. Systemic racism is real, and white ignorance is the driving force of both of those. And many white people don't even know this. Many of them don't even believe in it. What many Latinos, Hispanics, Asian people, and black people will say differently. But Roland Martin broke this down perfectly, and I'm paraphrasing here. First, we have to understand white fear. It is important to understand the insanity and the history behind it also. Without the proper knowledge of this, we will continue to be blindsided every time white fear inevitably rears its head. So let's look back when white fear really got its start. Slavery. The moment slaves were given freedom, the South became furious. January 31st, 1865, slavery was abolished. However, most slaves in those southern states didn't find out until June 19th, 1865, a day also known as Juneteenth. And that's just the beginning. Once black men started being voted into Congress in the South, white people lost their minds even more, especially those down in Mississippi. Dude, once white people started screaming, too many blacks are being voted into Congress, that's gotta stop. White fear started brewing in Mississippi. And guess what? Since 1890, not a single African American has been voted into state office in Mississippi. Since 1890. But wait, there's more. Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921. White fear embedded its ugly head into the section of the town known as Black Wall Street. Black folks had everything there. It was one of the most prosperous African American communities in the United States. Seeing black people succeed? Well, y'all know that don't fly with white mother. This scared white people so much that they thought black people are gonna start taking over everything and even enslave white people. I wish I was kidding. So you know what those white people did? They burned that whole section down. Burned it down because white fear was flowing through their veins. Central High School, Little Rock, Arkansas, 1957. Just because this high school was integrating 9 black students into their program, white fear emerged and had white people following them on their way to school, screaming at them, throwing racial slurs at them, spitting at them. I wonder whose grandma this is today, and if this is even alive. I would love to hear her opinion on this matter nowadays.
I've been hearing a lot about black fatigue recently, and I want to talk about it, but I can't do it here at home. We gotta go on a trip. So here we are. We are at Plaza Ferdinand VII, and that's a Confederate monument. And you wouldn't know it for looking at it, but this park you see behind me, 2 men were lynched here. Across the street, we have the Pensacola Museum of History. And there's a little sign right over there, remembering votes for women, and that somebody spoke here. And despite how beautiful this park looks, calm and serene, 2 men hung from lampposts. Not these ones, because the lampposts have changed since their deaths. There are all kinds of signs and monuments at this park. We have the excavation of a British fort, map of downtown Pensacola, statue dedicated to President Jackson, plaques commemorating a trail, big old cannons pointing to nothing, fun signs on the trash can to remind people to throw away their trash, dance moves, but absolutely nothing commemorating the deaths that happened here. Oh, but Ben, that happened so long ago. Tell that to this guy. His aunt, Lily Davis, was unalived by somebody. And the man that they captured, Leander Shaw, never saw his day in court. Why? Because he was dragged here to this park and hung from one of the lampposts. That woman's niece was also here, even though this happened over 100 years ago. Her niece and nephew were here protesting. What were they protesting? They were protesting that the Equal Justice Initiative was collecting soil from the location of every lynching in the United States, including here in Pensacola. The organizers of that event allowed them to put up a photo of Miss Davis and light a candle in her memory. But despite the fact that Leander Shaw never saw a day of court, they still think he was guilty. We have no idea if he did this or not. So all of you out there complaining about black fatigue, I'm tired of this kind of shit. I'm tired of white people complaining about things that happened in the past. I'm tired of white people blaming black people for things that they didn't do or preventing them getting a day in court. We see it today with Carmelo Anthony. He needs to get his day in court. So many white people, especially on this app, they just want to call him guilty and be done with it. Where just a few decades ago, they'd have had no problem collecting a posse so that afterwards they can celebrate. Whiskey for my men and beer for my horses. I really wish people who look like me could remember the words of a wise woman who once said, you should be happy that black people are looking for equality and not revenge. I hope you all have a good day.
America's first recipe was deep fried Native Americans. Yes, they used to cut Native Americans up into chunks and dip them in hot frying oil. That was the founding of this country. The entire town smelled like burning flesh. Yes, the real founding history of this country is, like I said, cannibalism. This is why they're trying to take this out of schools. They don't teach this in schools. And this is why you need to grab the book A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. They've been trying to ban this book for a reason, you guys. If you see the orange shopping cart down below, this book is still on sale and it's still available.
White people are the only group of people who will label you the aggressor because you refuse to let them disrespect you.
14 years. From 1863 to 1877, look at the progress that black people made attempting to be free, Blacks made great strides achieving political offices, developing private businesses, even setting up dozens of all-black towns. In fact, about it, we had built 60 towns. But white terrorists targeted them for destruction. As in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the first bombs that ever fell in America or on American soil fell on Black Wall Street. Y'all remember Black Wall Street in Tulsa?
But white culture is formed in savagery. I also said there isn't a place on God's green earth that they haven't come there and decimated the native inhabitants. There isn't a place. They are murderous savages. That's their culture. They call it conquest. We call it savagery. This is broad history. This is the history of white cultures. When they have the intention to invent a weapon, they don't just invent a weapon that can harm an enemy in one-to-one combat. No. They invent bombs that can decimate entire populations. They invent viruses like smallpox that they spread amongst unvaccinated Native Americans and then decimate their populations. And therefore the Americans, have got a native population which is less than the settler population in certain countries like Argentina. I mean, even a country like Brazil, yes, obviously there are still some native inhabitants there, but their population is less than those who were brought in from Africa as slaves, as well as those who came in as European settlers in the colonial times. So the culture of white people throughout white history, even to this very date, is that of savagery. It's that of inhumane behavior that is normalized to the point where they...
Now hear me on the hypocrisy. Not this when Hiram Revels was sworn in as the first black United States Senator on February 25, 1870. Not this when Blanche K. Bruce was elected the second black senator from Mississippi in 1875. Not this when Mississippi rewrote its constitution in 1890 to make sure no black Americans sat in that office again for 66 consecutive years. Not this when Dr. Charles Drew, the man who developed the modern blood bank, was refused service at white hospitals in the 1940s, despite inventing the technology that was saving lives in those same hospitals. Not this. Not one of those times. But the second the receipts go viral on TikTok in 2026, every cable news anchor wants to argue about whether the conversation is appropriate. The absolute audacity, family. The audacity of the timing. Let me connect this to the system. Feelings are not enough. Structure is. The American history textbook is not a neutral document. It is a publishing industry product, curated by state-level adoption committees, sold for profit to public school districts. The committees that wrote the standard chapter on American colonialism between 1940 and 1975 were overwhelmingly working in political climates that treated black contributions as marginal and indigenous. Contributions as tragic but vanished. Both narratives were lies of omission. Those lies became the standard syllabus. The standard syllabus became the cultural default. The cultural default became what got argued about on cable news every time somebody tried to teach the actual record.
Feel like they're entitled to behave like that.
Whites fear violence from us. We do not have a history of killing white people. White people have a history of killing us. See? And what you fear, may I say this, sir? What you fear, and it's a deep guilt thing, that white folks suffer. You are afraid that if we ever come to power, we will do to you and your fathers what you and your people have done to us. And I think you are judging us by the state of your own mind, and that is not necessarily the mind of black people.
White supremacists be like, we was conquerors and slave owners and shit. No, your ancestors were illiterate cousin fucking farmers. And the people who you claim to be descended from were also cousin fucking savages that reaped havoc across the world for economic gain. And most pathetically of all, here you are in the 21st century espousing the beliefs of racial hierarchy. You're a modern working class person under the delusions of fraudulent 18th century science. That is genuinely so fucking pathetic.
Let's talk about this story out of South Africa because it says everything about hypocrisy and white supremacy. A white farm owner and his workers are on trial for allegedly murdering 2 black women who were unarmed, women who were simply collecting old dairy products. And after they allegedly murdered them, they fed their bodies to pigs. Think about that for a second. They fed their bodies, human beings, to animals. The part that pisses me off the most with this is these are the same kind of people who look at black folks in Africa or America or anywhere else and call us savages. But tell me this, what is more savage than shooting 2 hungry women and then treating their bodies like trash? What's more barbaric than covering it up by feeding their bodies to animals? This isn't just a crime. This is a reflection of a long, ugly history. If you remember, colonizers stole land, they massacred villages, and they called it civilization. Slave masters whipped, raped, and lynched black bodies, and then had church the next morning. Apartheid made people strangers on their own land. And then when we resisted, they called us violent. See the pattern? Whenever black people act out of survival, we're branded as criminals. When white supremacists murder in cold blood, it's protecting property. It's isolated. It's lost in the news cycle somehow. And then you got politicians like Trump who push this lie of a so-called genocide against white farmers while ignoring the everyday violence against black South Africans. That's not just hypocrisy. That's propaganda trying to flip the script and make the oppressor the victim. You want to know the truth? Black people are not savages. What's in our blood is resilience, creativity, and survival against all odds. But what's in their history, their very foundation of white supremacy, is violence, exploitation, and the dehumanization of others. That's the real savagery. So the next time someone dares to point the finger at us, remind them, we didn't invent this cycle of brutality. They did. And we've been surviving it, exposing it, and rising above it for centuries. Now let me ask you this. When are we going to let them stop defining the narrative and start forcing the world to see the truth for what it is?
If you really think about it, white people are such deflectors. You guys literally tried to put the stigma and the notation on us that we're the aggressors, we're just violent, and I don't know, like we're just ready to kill everything we see, when it was y'all. Only in your history are you guys the savages. None in our history does it say that we created or started genocides, or we removed cultures from their country and took them to a whole different nation against their will, enslaved. I don't think black people was killing others because they were Jews. I don't think black people removed Native Americans from their land. I don't know. This is just history that I'm talking about. It's just like, please live comfortably in y'all skin, which y'all already do. But please just stop trying to put that persona on us, that we're just these negative people that's just ready to be violent, when it's really you guys. In every era, in every generation, you guys choose violence. It doesn't matter. In every scenario. In every scenario. I have nothing against whites, but I am all for black, if that makes sense. Take that what you will.
White People and Cannibalism Part 4. So, as you guys know, we've been on this journey together, learning about how white people just were munching on people for like the longest time ever, apparently. So we've already talked about medical cannibalism with the mummies, just as a brief recap, and that's why the mummies are so rare. And we're talking about cannibalism during and after slavery now. So, basically, the word picnic, which is now just really disgusting to me, and I'm never gonna use it again, really. It comes from pick a N-word, and basically what they would do is they would throw these like barbecue parties where everyone would gather outside, sort of like that one famous painting of everyone in the park, if any of my artists out there know what I'm talking about. And there would be like a lineup of people, they would pick one out, they would do a public lynching, and then after they'd publicly lynch the individual, they would barbecue them, and like everyone would take a little piece to eat for some reason.
When we look around and we see today in our politics a rich white man telling working class white people that their problem is brown people, we need to understand the historical pedigree of that. That is symbolic of the entire history of race and class politics in America. The history of rich white people telling working class and poor white people that their problem are black and brown people. Beginning in the 1600s, that is what happens. Prior to about 1670 or so, there was no such thing as the white race, at least not recognized as such, called as such. That is not what people of European descent were when they were in Europe. They were English, they were Irish, they were Scottish, they were whatever they were. They were not white. Only in the colonies do we become white, and for a very specific reason, because in those early years of the colonial period, where you had white indentured servants, one level above enslaved themselves, and you had African descended folks, some of them enslaved for life, others indentured servants also in the earliest years of the colonies, those people would often see their interests as being common. They all realized that they were being screwed over by the same landowners, the same elite. They fomented various rebellions like Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia, others as well. And as a result, the elite in the colonies realized that they had to figure out a way to get the other folks from Europe on their teams. They created this mentality that said, you're now a member of the white race, you're on our team, you're wearing our uniform. Now you're at the end of the bench, you may not get in the game, but you're on our team, you see. So then they start putting white folks, now called, on the slave patrols, right? Didn't really give them any land or any real power except the power to control people of color, which is why folks of color say, and they are right, that modern policing traces to the system of slave patrols and slavery, and we have to be clear on that, because that's the history. Right? Whiteness was created to divide and conquer, to create the notion that even though you might not have much, at least you're not black, at least you're not indigenous, at least you're not Mexican, at least you're not Chinese working on the railroads to build the transcontinental economy. You may not have much, but at least you have, as W.E.B. Du Bois said, the psychological wage of whiteness. And it's a trick that was played during the Civil War era on my people in the South, right? Rich folk, landowners in the South telling poor white folks who didn't own anything that they got to go out and fight to preserve the rich man's property in human beings. Fascinating. Why would you do that? Why would I go fight for your property? Well, because you told me that if I don't, these slaves are going to take my job. No, fool, they got your job. That's the point. If you got to charge $1 a day and you can make them work for free because you own them, guess who got the gig, Jack? Not you. When in fact, the system of enslavement was in the long run against the class interest of working class white folks, but they got suckered. Same thing happened in the union movement. You had white labor union folks who didn't want black and brown bodies in their union because it would reduce the professionalism of the craft. No, fool, it'll double the size of your union. And then when you go out on strike, they can't replace your happy ass with the brown folk that you didn't want next to you in the first place. Because when they do replace you with them, then you will blame them, not the elite. See how that works? It's a trick. And it has worked for hundreds of years. It is working on some folk right now. And it is our job to resist that with every fiber.
We talk about how ironic it is that the right demonizes people of color when the only time I feared for my life has been around a white man. I get so many hate comments like these few here. To the time I just write it off as immature, angry men, but the times that I've genuinely been scared that violence was going to be inflicted upon me have been white men. Not to mention that a lot of domestic violence as well as many mass shootings are committed by white men. There are going to be people in any demographic that commit crimes, but the fact that the right focuses so intensely on the single crime that a person of color commits is so dishonest. Some of the craziest things that have happened to me since I started posting is that I've gotten my account banned because white supremacists mass reported me for being underage, which I'm clearly not. They found my phone number and leaked it, so I had to change my phone number. They tried to get me fired by contacting any school in Chicago to see if I worked there. There was even an online page to see who was calling which school. I've literally been called a race traitor and told that I will be lynched along with POC. So no, people of color aren't the problem here. It is white men, and that's why I'm
That is what is now cracking under the weight of the receipts going viral. Picture a real person with me. A grandfather in his 70s, lives in Oklahoma. His own grandfather was a teenager in the Greenwood district the night the mob came. He has been telling that story at every family Thanksgiving since 1968. For most of his life, the only people who believed him were the people sitting at his table. This past month, his 15-year-old great-granddaughter walked into the kitchen, set her phone down on the table, and said, "Grandpa, somebody on TikTok just told your whole story. Everybody at my school is talking about it." He smiled. He had been waiting 58 years for that conversation. Scripture, before we close. The book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 2. "Write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it." Write it plain, so whoever reads it can run with it. We are running with it now, family. Here is what we do. We read the books. Isabel Wilkerson's Cast, 2020. Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr.'s Stony the Road. Dr. Tia Miles's All That She Carried, National Book Award, 2021. We support the institutions still doing the work. The Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, the Greenwood Cultural Center in Tulsa, the Schomburg Center in Harlem. We bank black where we can. One United, Industrial Bank, Citizens Trust. We do not attack anybody. We do not generalize. We name the system. We tell the history. We let the receipts do the work. That is the line. That is what dignity looks like when the truth finally goes viral. Hit subscribe, hit like, drop a comment. The receipts are out. The grandfather is finally being believed. The grandchildren are finally listening. Walk in that family. Walk like you are who 400 years of documented record has made you. I will see y'all on the next one.
Family, before you click off this video, I need to leave you with one more thing. The work we do on this channel is heavy work. We talk about identity, we talk about history, we talk about religion, we talk about systems, we talk about questions that the average dinner table conversation in this country is not yet ready to have at full volume. And when we do that work, sometimes the conversation gets sharp. So hear me on what this channel is and what this channel is not. This channel is a place where Black history and Black identity are centered, where the voices of our parents and grandparents were not allowed to amplify are amplified now, where the receipts are pulled out, where the names are said, where the record is told as honestly as we know how to tell it. This channel is not a place where we wish harm on any other community, not Jewish, not Asian, not Hispanic, not Native, not Arab, not African, not European, not Muslim, not Christian, not Buddhist, not Hindu, not Jewish, not secular, not anyone. The work of remembering who we are has never required us to attack anybody else's right to remember who they are. If you came here looking for a video that tells you Black America is right and somebody else is wrong, you are in the wrong place. If you came here looking for a video that pits us against another community, you are in the wrong place. The history of our liberation has always been a coalition history. From Yuri Kochiyama to Grace Lee Boggs, from the Highlander Folk School to the Third World Liberation Front, from the abolitionists in Boston in the 1840s to the Freedom Riders in Mississippi in 1961. We've always been at our most powerful when we have worked with our allies, named our shared enemies as systems rather than people, and held the door open for everybody who wanted to do the work of justice with us. So if any video you saw in this video named another community in a way that you found uncomfortable, hold the discomfort. Do your own research. Test what was said against the historical record. Come to your own conclusion. That is the work. That is always the work. Subscribe, like, drop a comment so we can keep the conversation honest in this section. Share this video with somebody who needed to hear it tonight. Walk in that family. Walk in love. Walk in truth. Walk in the dignity that 400 years of standing up has made you ready for. I'll see you on the next one.